Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in Iran and the Middle East in the past 24 hours. The biggest development in the Middle East today is that the US-Iran confrontation is no longer just a fight over whether a ceasefire survives. It is becoming a broader contest over regional leverage, economic pressure, and who gets to define the rules for security and commerce across the Gulf. The immediate flashpoint remains the Strait of Hormuz, but the bigger issue is what comes after. Iran is trying to demonstrate that pressure on Tehran carries consequences beyond Iran's borders. The United States is trying to show that Iran cannot use strategic waterways as leverage without paying a price. The diplomatic breakdown comes down to a fundamental disagreement over the June Memorandum of Understanding. Both sides claimed victory when it was signed, but they walked away with very different interpretations of what had actually been agreed. Iran believes the arrangement recognized its role in managing maritime traffic through Hormuz. The U.S. position is that commercial shipping should return to normal operations without Iranian restrictions. That disagreement has now moved from conference rooms to the water. Commercial traffic through Hormuz has fallen dramatically, with shipping companies, crews, and insurers increasingly treating the area as a high-risk environment. And that is exactly the kind of pressure campaign Iran has historically relied on. Tehran does not necessarily need to completely shut down global energy flows. It needs to create enough uncertainty that the market starts reacting. This is a strategy Iran has refined over decades. The Islamic Republic has always understood that it cannot compete with the U.S. militarily in a traditional sense. Instead, it focuses on asymmetric pressure. Proxies, drones, cyber operations, maritime threats, and economic disruption. It is less about winning a conventional battle and more about making everyone else pay a higher price for confronting Iran. The newest concern is that Iran could expand that pressure campaign beyond Hormuz. Iran has reportedly asked the Houthis in Yemen to prepare for possible action against shipping around the Bab al-Mandeb Strait if Washington strikes Iranian energy infrastructure. That matters because Bab al-Mandeb is another critical artery connecting the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. A serious disruption there would create a nightmare scenario for global trade, with two major maritime chokepoints under pressure at the same time. The Houthis have already demonstrated their ability to disrupt international shipping. They do not need a massive military campaign to create global effects. A limited number of attacks can force companies to reroute ships, increase insurance costs, and slow commerce. It is a very modern form of strategic competition, a relatively inexpensive capability creating outsized consequences. Saudi Arabia is watching this closely because it sits directly in the middle of this problem. Riyadh has shifted a significant portion of its oil exports through the Red Sea port of Yanbu to reduce dependence on Hormuz. That move provides flexibility, but it also creates a new vulnerability. If Iran or the Houthis decide to expand pressure against Red Sea infrastructure, Saudi Arabia's alternative routes become potential targets. The regional competition is also playing out in Iraq, where Washington and Tehran are competing for influence after years of Iran building deep political and security relationships there. Iraqi Prime Minister Ali al-Zaidi traveled to Washington this week, promising closer economic ties, efforts to reduce Iran-backed militia influence, and action against corruption. For the United States, Iraq represents both a security challenge and an economic opportunity. A more independent Baghdad could help reduce Iranian leverage and create new energy routes that avoid vulnerable maritime chokepoints. But Iran's influence in Iraq is not something that disappears overnight. Tehran has spent years developing relationships with political factions, religious networks, and armed groups. Some Iran-backed militias are resisting efforts to disarm, and recent attacks against energy infrastructure show that these groups remain capable of creating problems even when the Iraqi government wants to project more independence. Iran's broader proxy network remains active elsewhere as well. In Lebanon, the government is trying to strengthen state control over security decisions while managing the complicated issue of Hezbollah. Lebanese officials have said decisions on war and foreign policy must belong to the Lebanese state, while Hezbollah remains one of the most powerful armed groups in the country. The challenge is that Hezbollah is weakened compared with where it was before the current conflict. But it has not disappeared. It still has weapons, political influence, and support from Iran. That leaves Lebanon facing a difficult balancing act. Restoring state authority without triggering a confrontation that could fracture the country internally. Another important development involves Iran's efforts to maintain its regional military network, despite growing pressure. Syrian forces recently intercepted a weapons shipment reportedly intended for Hezbollah that included advanced drone components, anti-tank systems, and other equipment. The significance is not simply the weapons themselves. It shows Iran continues trying to rebuild and reinforce its partners, even while facing direct pressure at home. Those drone systems also highlight a broader change in warfare. Fiber optic drones are becoming increasingly important because they are harder to disrupt electronically and allow smaller groups to challenge advanced militaries. The battlefield lesson is that inexpensive technology is changing the balance between states and non-state actors. Inside Iran, meanwhile, the economic consequences are becoming harder for the government to ignore. Ordinary Iranians are dealing with inflation, uncertainty, internet disruptions, and difficulty planning their daily lives. The government can sustain military pressure for a period of time, but prolonged conflict creates a different kind of vulnerability. Iran's leadership still needs oil revenue, economic activity, and public compliance to maintain stability. That creates a complicated situation for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC benefits politically from confrontation because conflict reinforces its argument that Iran needs a powerful security apparatus. But the same conflict that strengthens the security establishment can also deepen economic problems that eventually threaten the broader system. China is quietly shaping the economic side of this crisis. Beijing has helped absorb some of the global energy shock by relying on large reserves and adjusting oil purchases. China has spent years building strategic stockpiles and alternative supply chains because leaders in Beijing have long viewed energy security as a national security issue. But China also has limits. It wants access to Iranian energy, but it does not want a prolonged regional conflict that sends prices higher and damages its own manufacturing sector. Finally, Israel is approaching a major political moment as unresolved conflicts continue shaping domestic debate. The upcoming election will determine how Israel approaches its ongoing challenges in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and its broader confrontation with Iran. The debate inside Israel increasingly centers on a difficult question. How does a country maintain security while avoiding being trapped in endless conflict? That conversation will likely shape Israeli policy long after the current fighting ends. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, stay kind, and never let anyone convince you that asking questions is a security threat. For the written brief, visit restrictedhandling.substack.com.